Hi, I'm Mark Edward Lewis, and welcome to Cinema Sound. This is the recording volume, and I'm here in the sovereign state of Texas in Hamill Brothers Studios. In this volume, we're going to get everything you need for getting great audio recorded on set handled. It's all going to be there. Microphones, choices, positions, volumes, recording levels, recorders, processes, tools, what to have on set, what not to do, what to do, who's important, who's not. It's a battery of hours of education and knowledge that just ain't intuitive and isn't available anywhere. You're gonna love it, but hang on. Let's roll. There's method to our madness in our logo, record, edit, fix, effects, music, mix, because that's generally what we say is the appropriate order for doing production and post-production. And we're gonna go through the recording section now, but before we do, I just wanna give you a breakdown of the general items that show up in audio, sort of an overview and a theory behind how audio works. Because when we talk about dialogue, sound effects, music, these kinds of things, it's important to know what they do, why they do what they do, so that we're just not using them because we think we know what to do with them. We know exactly what to do with them. Check it out. The three categories of audio are dialogue, sound effects, and music, DX, SFX, MX. And each one of them has their own highest and best use. Just like we say in real estate, you look at a property and you're like, oh, what's its highest and best use? It's an apartment complex, it's a fourplex, it's just a single family residence, whatever. We have the same thing in audio. The best and highest use of dialogue is story. Now, you writers, you're like, well, what do you mean? I can tell emotion with dialogue and things like this. And I'm going to say, not really, you can't. Because I can be talking to you and giving you all kinds of information and things, but until I have an issue with something, then you have an emotional response because you're creating a like-relatedness to what's happening on my face. But there was nothing happening, and I'm not a very good actor, there's nothing happening in what I'm saying, the actual dialogue that moves anyone emotionally. So it's good for story, and that's its highest and best use. Now, music's highest and best use is emotion. In fact, emotion is the giant thumb that mashes down whatever other emotional content is happening into what it says it's going to do. And I can prove that to you. So imagine you've got your heroine and she's being beaten down by the antagonist. Just really brutal. But you decide to play Mexican polka music. Yeah, nobody's upset, everybody's laughing, because it's funny. But there's nothing funny about her getting beaten down, but as soon as we put funny, not that Mexican polka music's that funny, but the juxtaposition of it is. Now, conversely, you could have her at the end of your picture, faced her demons, she's been on top of the mountaintop, she's up there, yay, like this, but you decide to play horror music. Everybody's scared, nobody's excited, right? You're waiting for the pterodactyl to come down and get her like this, expecting that to happen. It's the giant thumb, and you gotta be careful. In the music section, the music volume, we're gonna talk all about how to know what it is to get the right music and know how to choose it and get it in there and all that stuff. But for now, just know that music is the giant thumb that mashes every other emotional intent into what it says it should be. What's sound effects' highest and best use? Well, there is a word that came into the English from very, very old means, and it basically means you're in your wooden ship, it's been hulled from battle, it's sinking, and you're up to your neck in water, in the sea, even going up to your head, immerso. And in English, we call it immersion. Sound effects does nothing better than immerse the audience in the environment that you create for it. And I can prove that to you, because right now, as you watch this, you're not aware at all of the pressure of the chair you're in on the back of your legs. But you are now. I directed your focus. Just like you're not aware of the feeling of your shirt on your skin, but you're aware of it now. Again, I directed your focus. And that's what filmmakers do best, direct focus. Scientists say that your brain receives about 7,000 impulses a second and can focus on any 4. 7,000 a second and focus on any 4. Therefore, your brain, what it does most of your life is tune stuff out, including the immersion that you're in right now, just like the pressure on your legs, the shirt on your skin. There's more immersion going on around you all the time. Just take a second while we're sitting here together and take note of the immersion that you hear even right now. Lights, cars, people, animals. Some of you are actually aware that you're alive and you're breathing, yes, and your heartbeat. And doctors tell us that we can't hear our heartbeats, but that's just complete hogwash. Of course you can. In fact, how many gallons of fluid have been pumped through your skull while you've been watching Cinema Sound? A lot. That's not silent. That makes a lot of noise. But to your brain, it doesn't serve any instinctual purpose. The nature of your ability to stay alive has nothing to do with you being able to hear your breathing or hear your pulse or hear fluid going through your skull. But I promise you it's there, and your brain is tuning it out. We were in an anechoic chamber at Rode, which you'll see later in the presentation, and there's no sound in there, no reflections, no nothing. And it's a little disconcerting at first because there is no immersion anymore. It's just the ringing in your ears or whatever silence sounds like to you. Really, really disconcerting. And in a movie theater, the most disconcerting thing you can do to an audience is put them in dead silence. In other words, the room, the immersion of the theater itself, which hopefully is very quiet, but sometimes isn't. And we'll show you this example with Gravity in the inspiration section. So as filmmakers, the most important way and the easiest way to create immersion for our audiences is using sound effects and ambiances and Foley. We're going to go into all of that, believe me, in the sound effects section. And if you can't do that, then your audience is going to be, they're actually going to be looking at their watches. They're going to be like, oh, I'm in this zone here that I don't feel like I'm actually in your movie. We have a very difficult time suspending disbelief because they're actually in their own environment, not in the environment you designed for them. And the more sound effects, ambiances, and Foley and things that we give our audiences to tune out subconsciously, the more their brains go to subconscious sleep. And that's what we want. Because when audiences' subconsciouses are asleep, just like a good hypnotist, we can make them believe anything. We can make them buy anything, feel anything. We can make them believe that your implausible story and plot lines are good. We can make them buy the bad acting or the good acting. We can make them believe that the visual effects is real, all because we've done our job in immersion. And your job as a filmmaker is always to direct your audience's focus. And if you can't direct your audience's focus by putting them into subconscious sleep and then directing, you're a bad filmmaker. That's right, you heard it from me. I said it, you're a bad filmmaker. It's not about storytelling. It's about creating immersion for your film, for your audiences, and then leading them with subconscious sleep. I'm not here to bash film schools. In fact, if you went to film school and you got a degree, good for you. I mean, you probably got great people to collaborate with and great, people to help you with career and getting work. And I mean, you got a degree and, that's never not a good idea. But film schools spend 95% of their time teaching you how to do things visually that you need to know how to do. And of course, things have to look good visually. Of course they do. But if it's true that your audience's impact is 80% audio, in other words, in the entire impact that your audience receives, 80% of their impact comes from sound, then maybe we should be spending 80% or more of our time in film school learning about how to do great audio in production and post. But how much audio did you get in film school? What, a week? A few hours? Well, Cinema Sound is going to give you a lot of hours, probably way more than a giant semester of intensive education on the subject. And I can prove to you that the audience's experience is 80% sound. Because back in the silent film days, there was nobody that was moved enough by any silent film to go commit hara-kiri, to go kill themselves, because something was so intense that they were just like, oh, I gotta go end my life. But there was a radio show that aired where people threw themselves off bridges. And you know the one I'm talking about. That was so intense. Around the world, people went nuts. Surely that the world was gonna end. And that was completely devoid of picture. A lot of people think and say, and I'm sure you've heard it in your film school if you've been or anywhere else, that, picture is 50% and audio is 50%. And if that were true, then you would be able to watch something that had horrible video and good audio, and you would like it just as much as something that had horrible audio and good video. So let's put that to the test. And I'm going to prove this point to you, that audio is 80% of the audience impact. We're going to watch just the opening bits of the trailer to Blade of Honor, a series I'm producing. And we're going to watch it first with bad audio and good video, full resolution video. And just kind of mark in your mind, see what you think of it. Yeah, thank God that's over, right? Okay, now log that in your mind. Now we're gonna watch it again, same thing, with horrible video, like really messed up, and the perfect pristine audio. See what you think. If it were 50-50, you would like both of them exactly the same, right? Of course you would. But that's absolutely not the case. And in fact, if you would probably rather watch the horrible video without sound than watch good video with bad sound. So if it's true that audio is 80% of what the audience experiences, then man, we better get this thing in audio handled. And that's what we're gonna do. This is a clip from a movie I did a bunch of years ago called Cowboys and Engines. It stars Malcolm McDowell, Walter Koenig from Star Trek, Richard Hatch. It's a fun little steampunk movie. We're going to listen to the stems from the mix, the dialogue, the sound effects, the music, and then we're going to listen to them all together. See what you notice. We're going to start with the dialogue.
Ancient history.
What is that?
Trouble. Move. Get!
Notice there's some set sound that's in there.
What the hell's gutter is that?
Renegade Marathon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive?
Not really. Clockwork part stuck into a dead body.
Charming. Guinevere Wheeler.
Gwen what? Is that a name?
Oh, son of a bitch, my horse!
Hold on. You can't burn through that armor.
I was gonna shoot it through the eye.
Hey, don't do nothing. At least there's nothing vital. Corpse is mostly there to scare the hell out of people.
It's working.
So that's dialogue only, which is supremely boring, right? At least you know what's going on, but not very immersive, no emotional response to it. You're probably sitting there looking at your watch like, when's this going to be over? Interesting dialogue, interesting story. You get a little bit of the on-set stuff, which we used because it was there and saved us from doing a little Foley, but I promise you we did other Foley on top of it. But pretty much just story. Let's listen to the music and see what happens. So that's a lot cooler. That's a lot nicer. You've got a lot of emotional impact. Now, if you hadn't seen this before, you kind of wouldn't know what was going on. You'd get the idea, generally speaking, but you wouldn't know who the bad guys were, although the ugly guy's probably the bad guy. You wouldn't know what their relationship is necessarily, but you'd feel it. And you're like, oh, there's some suspense happening here. There's something cool going on, but I'm a little nervous. Is that also you feel the Western feel from that, the instruments that the composer chose. Let's try listening just to the sound effects, the Foley and the special effects. Let's see what happens with that. So with effects, you feel like you're there. It feels immersive. You feel like you're a part of something. You're not looking at your watch, but you don't really feel anything. You're like, oh, this is interesting. I feel like I'm more there, more immersion, which is super great. But again, if you hadn't seen this before, you wouldn't know what was going on really, and you wouldn't necessarily feel anything except maybe some intensity because there's things being blown up and knocked over and people running around. Let's put it all back together. Now look, this is going to want to make you to go to subconscious sleep when we put all these elements back together. Try to stay awake and see what you notice now that you might not have noticed before by watching this by itself.
Ancient history.
What is that?
Trouble. Move. Get!
What the hell's gutter is that?
Renegade Marathon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive?
Not really. Clockwork part stuck into a dead body.
Charming. Guinevere Wheeler.
Wait, what? Is that a name?
Son of a bitch, my horse!
Hold on. You can't burn through that armor.
I was gonna shoot it through the eye.
Hey, don't do nothing. At least there's nothing vital. Corpse is mostly there to scare the hell out of people.
It's working.
Or is that a Tesla chamber?
Yeah, what's left of him.
Reverse engineering the audio of the masters is the quickest way to become a better filmmaker. I'll say it again. Reverse engineering the audio of the masters is the quickest way to becoming a better filmmaker. And we are going to do a lot of that. Not that I'm necessarily a super master, but we're going to check out the masters themselves and we're going to reverse engineer it, and you're going to know those secrets that they had. Before we really jump in, I just want to give you kind of the breakdown as to why audio is so hard to grasp. You know, there's millions of videos on YouTube and all around the internet about how to do cinematography, directing, acting, editing, visual effects, lighting, all of it. And that's so awesome. But there's very little good stuff online about audio at all. And we'll talk about kind of some main reasons why that is in a bit, but it's also because audio isn't a primary sense. You know, when you were an infant, if you couldn't distinguish the difference between the approaching wall and the open door with your eyesight, you'd run into the wall and hurt yourself. And eventually, hopefully after the first try, you'd go, well, when that wall is coming this way in this eye and this way in this eye, and I have a parallax, it's approaching me and I should move my body and not hit that thing again. And bruised ourselves, we did a lot until we learned as infants how to navigate the world around us. But we navigated it with our eyes. Now, unless you were a child that was blind from birth, there is no child who learned how to navigate with hearing. So there was no penalty or no hurt or pain involved in us not hearing that the wall was approaching. We just kind of gave up on the ability to distinguish. There was no reason to distinguish anything. And in fact, the whole purpose of this education is to teach you how to distinguish what's going on, the elements of what you're hearing. Now, like Quincy Jones will listen to a piece of music and be able to pull out in seconds, in minute, breathless detail, every instrument, every sound, every panoramic use of everything in that track, even if it's in stereo, and be able to recall it to you and show you how to make it again. He's a master. Just like many of you are masters and experts in the visual sense, my goal is that by the end of this course as filmmakers, you're going to be masters in that which is not very intuitive, audio and sound, and being able to distinguish what it is you're hearing on set, what it is you're hearing in a mix, what it is you're hearing when you're doing a dialogue edit, what really goes into layering all those sound effects. Let's face it, audio isn't sexy compared to techno cranes and cool big cameras and drones and stuff. Really, a recorder and a microphone, cables, a boom pole, woo, not that sexy in comparison. And as a result, you know, people just don't like doing it. They're like, I don't want to do this. I'll just do my bit. And as long as it sounds okay, that'll be enough because the visuals are what I'm really interested in doing. And that's fine, but that's what we see in film festivals all the time, right? And that's why when we're watching a film festival film, we're like, wow, this is a really great film. I like the drama and it's got the human condition, and you're squinting the whole time. And you're like, why am I squinting? Well, I really wanted to like it, but there was just something, I don't know, it didn't look right, is what you'll say. I promise you, it has nothing to do with what it looks like. And it gets worse because audio lessons are so hard won because, again, it's not our primary sense. And it's just very difficult to find the wisdom because ain't nobody sharing it. Why is nobody sharing it? Because the last thing Hollywood wants you to know is how to get a $50 million impact or an 80% impact on your audience with sound. They know how to do it. They've been doing it to you for years. It's why they have the corner on the market about creating the idea in everybody's heads that their movies are better than yours. Sound. You know, you can watch a brilliantly put together visual image, but if it doesn't have that Hollywood mix or that Hollywood beautiful sheen, it's just another student film. So what? Nicely done. I like what you were doing that. Hopefully you'll get picked up. So you failed to get that audience impact, and Hollywood is not going to let you know about this stuff. That's why it's Cinema Sound. We're going to tell you because we don't care. And we want to make sure that you have the tools you need to raise the art form to the place that it should be for independent media. So I honor you for doing this, for jumping in with both feet to getting this thing, audio, sound, all of it, handled. And that's my commitment to you, that you're going to get this, that you're going to walk away from this course going, wow, everything that I'm doing from here on out is going to be completely changed. And it's not just going to change your media or your creativity. It's going to change how you write. It's going to change how you shoot. It's going to change how you edit for sure. And I'm guessing it's going to change your life. When we did the Sound Advice Tour, we talked to almost 1,100 filmmakers in 70 days in 32 cities all around North America. And most of those people had their lives transformed. And that's what I want for you. But look, this ain't going to be any easy ride. This is going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. And if you'll stick with me, if you'll hang in there, you're going to see results that you could have only dreamed of. It doesn't matter what city you're in, you're going to get those Hollywood results that you've always wanted. By the way, we're going to have a lot of fun too. So if any of you have problems having fun, just maybe go out and run around the block a little while and then come back and then just get all that stuff out. And then you'll know, okay, I'm back. I'm ready to dig in and have my life changed. Let's go. In this clip, Ben Burtt just does his absolute most incredible best in creating a characterization for Wally and does all of it in sound, including his little cockroachy guy. It's just the most amazing example of great music, great ambiances, and sound effects and Foley like crazy going on. And we just love Wally not only because he looks cute, but he also sounds so cute. Exactly. He's so cute. And then just sound effects, one after the next. It just never stops. And in an animation, you have to do all kinds of work to create this false world that never exists and was never shot. It just, exists out of nowhere. And sound is the only way to create that kind of immersion, that kind of interest. You can't really watch a silent animation film and get any kind of connection with the characters of the world. And here's music all on its own, which will show you why that's important later in the education. Well, it's just a fantastic example of how sound changes everything. There's a few dangers that you're going to run into in doing this course, but one of the biggest dangers you're going to run into is the I know that's. We talk about it in the other volumes of this course, as you'll see, but I know that is you look at something and you're like, I've seen that. I know that. I've heard that before. And then you kind of fast forward, or worse, you just tune out. And what happens is we're going to be talking about things that you probably have experience with, maybe a lot of experience with. In fact, the opening parts of this generally are pretty rudimentary so that we can get people up to speed and no person's left behind so that we can take them to the levels that we want them to go to. But there might be something in there for you that if you just tune out, I know that, you'll miss. And that'll be probably the most important thing you could learn, and you'll have tuned out and missed it. So what I'd like you to do is just take your hands, put it next to your temple, just like this. I want you to pull out the I know that's. I want you to set it to the side. Be careful of, whoever's next to you or whatever, or anything's next to you. Stick it there on the floor. And when you're done with the course, you can pick it up and put it back in if you want. Otherwise, the maid knows how to take care of the I know that's. Now, there's three kinds of mixers that I'm going to be talking about in this course. One is like a mixing board, just like this Roland M480. Anything that has little faders on it, even if it's a digital looking version of it, I'd call it a mixer, or mixing console, mixing board, digital mixing board. The other mixer is the recording mixer, or the sound recordist. I hate sound recordists. They're always doing everything wrong. And you're going to find out about that later. But the third one we're talking about is the re-recording mixer, or the person who takes all of the bits from your sound effects, ambiances, dialogue, music, puts it into a session and makes that nice Hollywood magic, making it all sound good, and then creates your deliverables. That's the re-recording mixer. But all three of those I'll be calling mixer, so don't be confused. An EQ is different than a fader. Duh, Mark. No duh. A fader, what it does is push the whole frequency spectrum louder or softer on a particular channel. Little slider looking thing. An EQ does the same thing, but only in a specific frequency band. And most EQs have multiple bands so that you can push up or down a specific frequency. There's a thing called a parametric EQ, and that allows you to have each band a different width that you can choose. So you can have a big wide width as you go up, a narrow band as you go down. There's also a thing called a graphic EQ. And you've seen these various versions of them in car stereos and boom boxes where they're little sliders denoting, high, mid, low frequencies, treble, bass, whatever. There's one that we're going to show you called a 31 band EQ that gives you really specific control over every third octave of every sound in human hearing, which we'll talk about later. But very useful, incredibly useful tool for mixing and a whole bunch of other stuff. Timecode is a unit of measurement for various kinds of standards throughout the world to measure time. In North America, we use 29.97 frames per second for color television at standard definition. High definition, we use 23.976 frames per second. I know, really nice round numbers, right? Ask me or IM me privately about why all this is. Film itself, when we used to shuttle film through, shutters, that's 24 frames a second. If you're in the European Union or in Australia or one of these places, then your television is 25 frames per second. And then if you want to do overcrank, then you go way out into 60 frames, 120 frames, 320 frames, whatever that is. So timecode keeps track of everything. And sometimes you'll see the timecode on the slate there so everybody can see it on camera and things like this. We also use it in post, of course, so that everybody has the same reference in time as everybody did in production. Hertz has nothing to do with the rental car company, everything to do with cycles per second. So this is about 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second. And in audio, we use this into hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of hertz cycles per second out here in the airwaves. Pan, nothing to do with the Disney character at all, or anything that you use in your kitchen. Has to do with where we put sound out here in left and right speakers, or in surround all the way back or up, as you'll see in a bit. So if I say I'm panning something somewhere, it doesn't mean that, if you're from England, doesn't mean that I hate it. It just means that I'm putting it somewhere in a panoramic spectrum. Now, look, I grew up in Los Angeles in a place called Orange County, and we kind of speak differently there, or at least we did back in the 70s and 80s when I grew up. Now, if you've seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the way Bill and Ted talk, that's kind of how I grew up. It was kind of like that, most egregious, let's mow some grinds, most heinous, all that stuff. I've gotten rid of most of it, but the thing I haven't gotten rid of is dope. And it doesn't mean drugs or anything like this, it just means it's totally awesome, so don't be confused. When is the best time to start post-production? Yeah, pre-production. That's when the best time to start is. Because if you don't, you run aground on all kinds of things, like maybe you wished you knew that you were going to ADR the whole film and you could have chosen different microphones to use on set or different processes to use. Or you knew that the visual effects shots were going to be in a specific way and you wished you could have shot them differently. But if we don't do post-production and pre-production, what we fall aground on almost all the time is false economy. False economy is pretty much the death of most productions and certainly post-production. So check this out. Imagine you golf. Whether you do or not, just imagine. And you're a good golfer, and you golf with Sigourney Weaver. Not bad. Now, you're shooting a film, and you've conned her into being your lead. Not bad. And she's willing to do it for $10,000 a day, which I don't know what her real rate is, but I promise you it's at least that much. So real good for you. You've got a 20-day shoot. You're going to spend $200,000, not counting SAG fees, but let's call it a nice round figure, $200,000 for Sigourney Weaver to be in your film. Now, you also need somebody to record audio. Now, you could call one of my buddies at $750 a day with a $250 a day kit fee for $1,000 a day and get great audio. But you're like, I don't want to spend $1,000 a day. That'd be $20,000. Nah, I don't want to do that. Because you know that your aunt's dog's cousin's boyfriend has an iPhone and he has a special microphone that goes on it and he's got a little recorder on it. And he's only $50 a day with no kit fee. So you record with your buddies, cousins, whatever, 20 days. You think you get good audio? No way. It's horse crap. And that means you're in ADR for all of her dialogue and all the dialogue of everybody else. Well, that's not bad, right? Except, do you think Sigourney Weaver's contract, even though she's your golfing buddy, do you think that it included a bunch of days in ADR? Well, how many days? Well, figure 5 days to do a feature-length amount of ADR, doing ADR the way the Hollywood way does it. Not the way I do it, and I'll show you, but the way Hollywood does it, yeah, 5 days. You're into it for another $50,000. No, it's not under contract. And you got to spend $2,000 a day for the ADR engineer and the ADR studio. How have you done financially? Yeah, poorly. False economy, right? trying to save more money now only to spend more of it later. I'll give you another great example. When I was a kid, we used to use things called cassettes. I know, what the heck are those? They're little analog tape things. If you're older, you remember them. If you're younger, just go with me on this. They used to cost between, I don't know, $1.50 and like $8, depending on how good they were. And you can remember the top level cassette, right? They were the metal bias. And imagine if you'd spent $50,000 on recording your record, right? And now you put it all on credit cards, you were maxed out, and you needed to send your cassette to an A&R rep so that they could give you a record contract. But you're like, you know what? I'm kind of out of money. I'm just going to go use one of the normal bias cassettes, not even the Chrome, the normal bias cassettes for $2. And you record your demo on that and you mail it to the A&R rep. What do you think the A&R rep does with normal bias cassettes, which he gets all day? What's the first thing you think he does? Yeah, he throws them in the round file. That's exactly right. Because if you did a normal bias cassette with your recording, that means you are either committing false economy or you're a bozo. So what you have done is saved $6, because the metal bias cassette's about $8, to waste $50,000. Now look, I know I'm getting kind of strong about this, and you'll kind of get used to it as you go through this. I kind of get strong about a few things, so just relax. It's nothing personal. You're committing false economy somewhere in your life, even right now. And while I've been talking about this, you've been remembering, oh yeah, there's that thing. And before we get to the next volume, I want to make sure you review what that false economy thing is and find a way to fix it, because it will bite you. Automatic dialogue replacement basically means you didn't get good audio on set, or you had planned to not get good audio on set, and you're bringing the actor back into the studio to re-perform their performance of dialogue in a nice, isolated, quiet environment on a nice microphone. Now, if you had recorded on the set with lavaliers, and there was any point at which you wanted to use some of that set dialogue, it's extremely important that when you do ADR, you also use lavalier microphones. It's a common mistake to get a really nice, expensive microphone and do ADR on that. But the problem is trying to get ADR to sound like the on-set experience, very, and I'm just going to say impossible to do, unless you use the same kind of microphone that was used on set. If you chose to use a boom microphone or a shotgun microphone in your mix, that's what you want to record on for the ADR portion. Now, how many of you know that 100% or 99.98% of Hollywood feature films are all ADR'd? Every line. Every line is. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they, with all the money they have, why wouldn't they just try to keep the on-set recording stuff? Control. It's much easier in post to just spend the money, have the actor come back and show up and redo the lines all on a super nice microphone in an isolated, controlled environment. And then in post, they have maximum control to do whatever they want. But here's the problem with ADR, and this is my biggest problem with it. I love having control. I mean, I'm a control freak. I'm a total white knuckler. But the most important thing in any film scene is the performance of the actors. And if you lose that performance because you had to go to ADR and the actor couldn't quite recreate it 6 months later, by the time you got there, you've lost everything. So ADR, unless you know what you're doing, could actually ruin your performance, or you're going to end up spending so much time trying to recreate it that you might as well have just spent that time cleaning up your on-set audio. So be very, very careful. We're going to show you how to do ADR that's 10 times faster than what Hollywood does, and we're going to show you when to do ADR so that you don't have this problem. Decibel is a standard unit of measurement for voltage or sound pressure levels. It's a few other things too, but for audio, those are the two that matter the most. And we find out what those ratings are either on LED meters or VU meters or on sound pressure level meters. So how many of you have seen one of these before? Yeah, these little spring-loaded old things that we used to call them VU meters. And they were great. They showed you the average of what a voltage is, or how loud something is in decibels. Notice I said average, because it's just a spring-loaded needle. It can't go bang on a really high peak or something like this. It's just gonna go, I'm gonna try to get there and do my thing. That's why some VU meters have a little light on them called a peak meter, and that lights up if you happen to go over the zero in the analog realm, and the needle hasn't gotten there yet. So some of you have like a Zoom H6 or a Zoom H5 or some other kind of recorder that allows you to set meters in a VU weighting. What that means is it's acting like a VU meter, like a spring-loaded thing. And some of you are experiencing distortion on your recorders, even though it's not going over zero. That's a really good reason for it to be doing that, because it's not showing you those high, fast peaks. It's just showing you this average, and you may be going over and not know it. So make sure you're on peak if you have a selection. And there's no such thing as a spring-loaded peak meter, so there's always going to be some kind of a digital meter in order to show you that. 48 volts or phantom power, it's not very scary. Don't worry about the phantoms. We talk about the magic smoke that lives in all electronic equipment. So we want to keep the magic smoke in the equipment so that it doesn't escape. You know what I mean? For those of you who have seen the magic smoke escape, keep it in the machine. But this has nothing to do with phantom power or 48 volts, DC, direct current. That's what's required by condenser microphones. And they require this little power thing. So if you have a recorder and you see plus 48 or, phantom or some other thing like that, if you have a condenser and you can't get sound out of it, there's a good reason for that. You need to engage that power or you won't get anything. A condenser microphone is a beautiful, high sensitivity, really wonderful frequency response microphone that is highly sensitive to being dinged and bumped, and certainly, please God, don't drop it. A dynamic microphone, on the other hand, is a very simple electronic device that you can swing around on a microphone, you can bounce off a wall or a ceiling, you can drop it in your beer, and it's still gonna work. That's why they use them on stage, like Mick Jagger. You think they'd give him a condenser microphone? I don't think so. If he's breaking guitars over his head, he's gonna break a microphone over his head. But dynamic microphones are indestructible almost. They're really great. But they do suffer because they don't have the same kind of frequency response that the condensers do. And on set, we almost exclusively use condenser microphones. Now, there's another kind of dynamic microphone called a ribbon microphone, which we're going to demo in a different chapter of this volume. Proximity effect is what happens when you get very, very close to a microphone. And what happens is bass frequencies are amplified. Let me show you what I mean. There's a couple things you should know, especially if you're doing microphones in the studio and even on set. It's called enharmonic distortion and harmonic distortion. You get enharmonic distortion when you're using any kind of digital equipment, even just a recorder. When we use pulse code modulation or PCM recording, that's what we do. We get enharmonic distortion, and your brain kind of goes, I don't like this. It's one of the reasons why CDs, back when they came out, everybody hated. They were like, this doesn't sound great. It sounds funny to me. And, probably had more to do with the fact that we were recording at 441 kilohertz and 16-bit. Than enharmonic distortion, but it's just the nature of how digital recording works. Harmonic distortion, however, is what we used to get when we ran analog tape and spooled tape. Even cassettes have harmonic distortion, and that's that which your brain, even though it's always lying to you, loves and goes, I love that compression and that subtle thing. Now, normally, we never want to have distortion, but this is distortion that shows up because of the nature of the recording process, and whether you use analog or digital, you get harmonic or enharmonic distortion. Now this microphone here, you've probably never seen before, unless you've come to Cinema Sound and seen it. This is a custom-built DVA 747 tube microphone. You're like, tube microphone? Why would you want that? Yeah, this whole thing here is a tube. And like from the 40s. And up here is a gigantic kind of 50-cent piece size diaphragm in there. Wonderful sound. And why we use a tube is because it creates that harmonic distortion, which otherwise we really don't get with just a straight solid state microphone. So we get that beautiful harmonic distortion from this tube, and then all the beautiful solid state stuff goes down the wire to a ballast that upreses the voltage for the tube, and we get this really lovely thing. Now this microphone right now is set to cardioid polar pattern, and right now it is a condenser. That means it requires power. In fact, the tube requires about 10,000 volts. So if we switch from my lav to this, remembering never to test a microphone by poking it, but scratching the grill, yes. You can see this sounds so much different. I mean, it's a beautiful, clean, sounds like I'm James Earl Jones. Not that the lav sounds bad, but this just sounds amazing. Now, it's a cardioid polar pattern, which means I sound great here. But the minute I move over to here, I'm dead. There's nothing here. If I talk to the rear of it, all you're hearing is the reflection of the room. I can talk down like this. That's not great. And certainly it sounds like baloney here. As long as I'm here, I'm good. Same thing happens if I start backing up. When I get here, I'm dead meat. It really only wants to pick up right here, which is great, really great in the studio. And that's the cardioid polar pattern. Another thing about condensers, and you may have already noticed it listening to this microphone, is that they're uber sensitive, which makes them sound great. High frequencies sound great, low frequencies sound great. But if I go, and I'm going to be very light about this, Peter Piper picked a peck, you notice that it's just, giant explosions, like that, right? And you wouldn't get this with a dynamic microphone. That's why with any condenser, you want to have a pop filter or some kind of shield between you and that very sensitive microphone. So with the pop filter, I'm just going to bring this thing in here. Peter Piper picked a peck. And I'm going to go really, really hard. Peter Piper picked a peck. That's as hard as I can do without losing my teeth. And it's really good. And this is a super cheap, I have to be careful with my plosives now that it's gone, super cheap. It's like $6 or $7 on Amazon, whatever. I don't know. Just found it just to show you that it doesn't take much. It's got 2 layers and not one. A single layer thing isn't going to work as well as this dual layer one, even though it's super cheap. But it allows this diaphragm to be protected. And this is, again, any condenser, you're going to have this. Now I want to show you a couple more things that are inherent in condenser microphones. First of all, and we've already noticed this, I have beautiful high frequencies, but the minute I go off axis, even though I'm still sort of in the cardioid area, but if I start talking away from the diaphragm, all of a sudden those sibilants are really reduced. And if I go back on axis, those sibilants are greatly enhanced. Even if I'm over here and talk toward the microphone, sibilant. I mean, you want on a cardioid, if you want sibilants to be right into the diaphragm. Similarly, if you have somebody who's really, really sibilant, like some women's voices, and even some men's voices have that really edgy S sound, you can just move them to the side and angle their faces toward the diaphragm, and you'll get less of that sibilance. The second thing to know about condenser microphones is a thing called proximity effect. Now, I'm going to get really close to this and it'll sound like I'm getting louder, which I will, but I want you to notice what happens to the bass frequencies. So if I get very, very close, even though I'm talking the same level, you can hear that the low frequencies are enhanced. Whereas if I come back here, even just a few inches, granted it's quieter, but the low frequencies are kind of removed. Whenever you're doing a voiceover and you want that big, powerful sound, you want to get as close to this as you can, that big, powerful, low-frequency sound, and you get that proximity effect. Obviously, we'd want to be like this so we can go proximity effect, not proximity effect. Interestingly enough, and we're going to discover this with the omnidirectional polar pattern and omnidirectional microphones, this doesn't happen. So anyway, keep this in mind, proximity effect, sibilance for on-axis, and harmonic and inharmonic distortion. Now, there's really no such thing as a boom mic. You may hear me say it throughout this education, but there ain't no such thing. There's a shotgun mic, there's a supercardioid, a hypercardioid microphone, one of those long-looking things with the little slits in it, But there's no such thing as a boom mic. There's a microphone that goes on a boom pole, but that's usually some kind of a hypercardioid, supercardioid, or a shotgun is the overall saying for that. So don't be confused if I say boom mic. That's not some extra special kind of mic that goes on a boom pole. It's just a saying, a colloquialism, so don't be confused. You may hear me speak about signal to noise ratio, which is a really weird scientific term. All it means is that it's the signal, and by signal I mean like the dialogue, somebody speaking that's being recorded, versus the noise, the ambient noise of both the room or the exterior that your microphone is recording in, and the natural mechanical noise of the microphone, the cable, and the recorder. All of that stuff is the noise, and this dialogue would be the signal. We want to get the dialogue as loud as possible, far away from the noise as we possibly can, without clipping or going over zero. Signal to noise ratio.
What we have here is just a simple bit of dialogue.
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
And it's just going to loop back and forth. And on another track, I've just got straight noise. We're going to go over here to our mixer, and we're going to open up an oscilloscope. And what an oscilloscope does is show us waveform both left and right.
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
Renegade Maridon.
And there's the loop. So here's dialogue, lots of heavy breathing, etc. And then it loops. So what we're going to do is check out the difference between what this sounds like generally dry, and then we're going to add some noise to it and see if you notice any difference. And then let's turn it up kind of loud. Let's get a -12.
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
Renegade.
Obviously, this is a major issue to deal with here if you had this kind of noise, and probably nothing would save you if it was that loud. But a signal to noise ratio means how loud is your actual true signal, in this case the dialogue, versus the noise. Now, your noise can be anything from the microphone noise, the mechanical noise, system noise, preamp noise, digital noise, all kinds of noise. We want to keep that noise level as low as possible. And even if I turn off this noise track,
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
there's still plenty of noise in this track. This is just them rustling around, but if you listen carefully,
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
there's stuff in there in the background. But obviously, if we're having other noise in there, it makes it
Better is
worse.
that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Even this is really not acceptable.
Better is that?
Renegade Maridon. Left over from the war.
Is it alive? Better is that?
Renegade Maridon.
So sometimes you can see, just looking at a scope like this, what your noise level is and whether or not it's acceptable. Now, in this case, of course, they're rustling around. But if you have just straight dialogue and no one's rustling, and you see this amount of noise between the dialogue, you've kind of got a problem. And it'll be time for you to go look at the fix section to figure out how to fix it.
Phase or out of phase has nothing to do with Star Trek weaponry, okay? This is not a Type 3 phaser. It's not like phase means if you have one waveform that starts up like this from one microphone and goes down, and another microphone that also the waveform goes up and then down, they are said to be in phase. If you have one of those microphones that the thing starts down and goes up and they do this, that means that they are out of phase. And we'll talk about phase cancellation later, where that actually means that if you sum those two together, you actually get a null volume, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
This is a frequency analyzer. You can see down here, this is 16 hertz, which is like almost farting noises. And then up here, you've got like 16 to 20 hertz, 20,000 hertz, which is certainly as high as any of us are going to be able to hear. And I've got a little instrument here, a little synthesizer. And you can see how it's reacting to the various notes. So this is middle C. That's middle C, and you can see the fundamental frequency is here, around 250-ish hertz. Up here are the overtones, things that basically contour the sound and make it what your brain thinks is a distinctive sound from any other sound. Now what I'm going to do is play an octave below this. And you can see now the fundamental frequency is at 125 hertz, exactly half of the 250. And if I do another octave down, and another octave down, now I'm going to run out of keys. This is the lowest key on the keyboard. You can see down there, it's like almost like a fart noise, but we're going to keep going. We're going to go up now. Back to 250. And the highest note on the piano. Yeah. So each octave is a doubling in frequencies. It's almost like watching somebody play the piano. Just looking at frequencies. Now let's check it out with a piano sound. We're going to take a listen to piano. I'm going to open up. I'm in Logic, by the way. This is Logic Pro from Apple. I'm just going to load a simple classical piano. you're going to notice something pretty different. There's that 250, 25, right? Let me change my octaves here. There's middle C. Way down there. But look at how many more overtones the piano has. Just lots and lots more of them, and it gives it a lot more high frequencies and a lot more complex sound. And the more overtones we have, the more the complexity of the sound, the more rich it is, and sometimes the more difficult it is to deal with. I mean, there's even noise down here in the low end because of the hammer mechanism on the piano, kind of that funkiness. Now, of course, you're hearing my actual hand hit this plastic key on a controller, but in the real world, you would hear a little funkiness from a piano. It's a very complicated instrument. Now, let's take a look at something else. Now it's got a pretty cool modulating kind of thing that's going on. You can hear those extra notes that are in there, and you can see them in the analyzer. There it is. There's that extra overtone, da-da.
Now, how can you tell how loud something is? Well, it's really hard unless you have trained ears, and it takes a lot of years in the circus to train your ears. Otherwise, you need a decibel meter. Decibel meters, you can get them anywhere, like Radio Shack, whatever. I mean, the value of a decibel meter is not in how it reads, it's in the microphone, just like the apps on your phone. Look, an app is just testing data and voltage, no problem. But don't expect to get a good reading of decibels from the microphone on your iPhone, even the microphone on the headphone thing. Then the app's going to return a great result. So in the world of knowing how loud something is, get yourself a software piece for your phone or a decibel meter. Get used to what certain loudnesses sound like. Now in headphones, a little different. You can't just point a decibel meter at a headphone and expect to get a good result because it doesn't take into account bone conduction, which is a lot of the sound delivery that happens. So, whatever it sounds like out here, if it's 85 decibels out here and you kind of get an idea what that sounds like, when you put headphones on, it should feel like 85 decibels if it were out here. That's give and take, but that's the basics around how you know how loud something is and how to get good at knowing how loud it is. So what is sound? Well, sound is just high and low pressure waves in air beating tens of thousands of times a second. Just like in water, if you drop a pebble in water, you see the waves up and down, high and low pressure. It's the same thing in air. It's just you can't really see it because you don't really see air unless you live in Los Angeles. Then you see a lot of air. Since I grew up there, I really don't trust air that I can't see anyway. But generally, you can't see air, and that's a good thing. And now would be a really good time to talk about hearing loss. There are three ways you can get it. One, disease, obviously, or blows to the head. So if you're really bad at fighting, don't get into a bar fight. Or if you're really good, chances are you don't have a problem with this. But if you take a good knock to the head, it can jostle the hearing mechanism and you can have permanent hearing loss. And of course, disease and certain antibiotics can cause permanent, extremely damaging hearing. So we want to be careful about those. The second way to get it is transients, really loud, sharp sounds that come out of nowhere in quiet environments. So if you and I were in the same room together and I pulled out a .45 and I fired it, both of us would experience extreme hearing loss in the high frequencies. Well, why is this so? Well, let's look at how the ear works. The first thing to notice is on the outside of the ear, you've got these little things here, this stuff right here. Well, this is actually the device, depending on your religion, that God or whatever evolved that has us know where sound is coming from in the panoramic 3D spectrum. So Van Gogh, when he had his ear cut off, did he go deaf, as many suppose? Not at all. He just lost the ability to know where sound was coming from directionally on that side. And as we'll learn as we move through the course, the brain is the perfect pattern recognition system, and it only needs a few bits of information to create a whole pattern. And my guess, just my opinion, is that with the use of his one good ear and a monodirectional other ear, within a few weeks or maybe months, he was able to regain most of his ability to know where sounds were coming from, which is pretty cool. Cool to have a brain like that. Then, once it goes through this outer membrane and it gets into your middle ear, depending on your waxy buildup, the sound hits your ear balls, and then it rotates that, and then the smallest bones in your body that goes to this little snail-like looking thing called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea are microscopic little hairs. Each hair corresponds to a particular frequency in the frequency spectra. The high frequency hairs, which are the shorter ones, are at the front of the cochlea, and at the back are the long-haired ones. And those are for low frequency. So when a gunshot or something else, like even clapping your hands together or two by fours together in a small or into a soft environment, what happens is that sound impacts really hard that system and can even fracture those little bones and then rips those hairs out of the cochlea. And because the high frequency hairs are at the front, that's why we typically lose our high frequencies in our hearing before we lose the low frequency ones. Once you've lost one of those hairs, they don't grow back, they're permanently gone, and you've permanently lost the capacity for hearing that frequency ever again. Now, there are medical procedures where you can bore through your bones or whatever and install a different kind of sensor and get to the aural nerve and all those kinds of things, and that's fine. But there's still, at least in 2016, there is no actual way to rebuild and recreate the hearing mechanism once it's been permanently damaged, which is why I say your hearing is your most important sense, because there's no such thing as LASIK for your hearing. There just isn't. You can't get that surgery or whatever and make it work. You can regain some of it, but nowhere near what we'll need to make great mixes and great audio for our productions. The third way to get hearing loss is exposure. In my experience, you can be okay without hearing loss at 80 decibels for 8 hours, 90 decibels for 2 hours, 100 decibels for a half an hour, 110 decibels for about 7.25 minutes, 7.5 minutes. And if you're listening to things at 120 decibels, you're just damaging your hearing, period. You shouldn't ever be at that level. The threshold of pain, they say, is around 125 to 128. That means when you're just like, oh, my hearing, it just hurts. And you're actually feeling physical pain. And we never, ever want to be anywhere near that. So some of you are already realizing what kind of a curve mathematically this is, and it would be logarithmic, yes, or exponential, geometric. Just depends on whatever your religion is. Now, if you look here, you can see that at 150 decibels, we can see here, that's actually the point at which your earballs perforate from your skull, and that's incredibly painful and certainly to be avoided. And we can see here how a tornado is something we don't really want to be involved with. And that's probably why when Dorothy landed in Kansas, she was profoundly deaf. Now, here's something I did on my own. This is the readout from an app I have on my iPhone. I know not very accurate, but I didn't want to, be using a decibel meter while I was driving, although I guess I was using an iPhone while driving, so that's not good. But this is the interior volume, dB/SPL, sound pressure level, of the cabin of my Mazda 3 when it's on pavement. Notice that it's, roughly 79 decibels. Now, notice it when it's on cement. Notice it's quite a bit louder, 5 decibels louder. Now, this is a flight that I took from Oregon, the state of Oregon, to California, and I was near the rear of the plane. Notice that volume on an average, almost 90 decibels. Now, if you're like, okay, I'm going to fly to Australia, as we have here on Cinema Sound, to get some of this great footage for you in education, and you got a 14-hour flight, what's the most important thing you should have on your person during that flight in order to keep hearing damage from happening? Yeah, earplugs. Always carry earplugs with you. Always, always carry earplugs. Always. Because there ain't no LASIK for your hearing. Back in the old days, we used to record on tape. These little machines called Nagras, whatever you want to call them. And they would spool little pieces of tape across record heads and on the tape with little oxide layers, and magnetically the record head would exchange or change the placement of those oxide particles to represent the voltage that was coming in from the microphone. And then when we'd play it back, there was a play head and it would read it and then send the voltage that was stored in the oxide particles magnetically on the tape back to a speaker, blah, blah, blah. It was actually pretty good. You know, you had a lot of noise and a lot of other things, not the best frequency response, but depending on how fast you shuttled that tape across those heads, you could get a pretty good sound. Certainly a nice warm sound for you audiophile folks. Nowadays, we use digital. And what happens there is the same voltage comes from the microphone, but goes to an analog to digital converter, which then uses bits and sample rate to translate the voltage into ones and zeros, digital information. That digital information is then stored on a drive or some kind of medium. Then when we recall it, we play back the ones and zeros and it goes to a digital to analog converter and is the same process in reverse. And we have what then is turned into voltage from those ones and zeros. It's a pretty ingenious process that started, decades and decades ago. It's imperative for us to be able to know that we're recording at a good frame rate, a good bit rate. Otherwise, you get awful audio. So how does a microphone work? Well, a dynamic microphone is a pretty easy electronic thing to deal with and understand. So you got the sound pressure that's coming in from the outside. It goes by the little grill. That's the thing that everybody spits on. And then it goes to the diaphragm. And the diaphragm's extremely flexible and very happy to move back and forth with whatever sound pressure is coming to and fro. Then those little copper things basically represent what we would call the back plate. Inside, as that diaphragm moves, those copper rods move and create a magnetic charge on the magnet, and that voltage that is ensuing comes out down the cable, and you've got voltage coming out of the magnet from the microphone. Now a speaker, you can see the voltage coming in from the amplifier. It engages power to the magnet, and inside the magnet are these little coil-looking things again. As the magnetic charge raises and lowers, that pushes the little copper things up and back, and those copper things happen to be connected to the speaker cone itself. And as they move from that magnetic push and pull, the speaker actually moves and creates higher and lower sound pressure levels in the air. Now, some of you are noticing something very interesting about microphones and speakers, and that's that they're exactly the same, except reverse voltage direction, at least for dynamic microphones. And in fact, you can use a microphone as a speaker and a speaker as a microphone if you're careful. There was a session I did years ago where I had a choir of people and I didn't actually have enough headphones for one girl, and I took a microphone and I ran it into the system and sent a signal to it, and this poor girl had to do a 3-hour session with this thing in her ear, but it worked and it was able to make up for the fact that I was missing a headphone. Now look, if you're gonna put a signal into a microphone, don't send a speaker level amplified signal to it. You'll hear a little and that'll be the end of your microphone. That'll be the diaphragm of the microphone splayed all across the inside of the grill of it. Send a headphone signal to it and be very, very careful. Microphones aren't all of that. They're not all that robust. Like I said, dynamics are indestructible from the outside, but from the inside, you can easily destroy them. So have fun with that. Now, you can also yell into a big speaker, make sure it's off. And I mean, you're gonna have to yell like Godzilla to get those giant speaker things to move and get a voltage out, and you can use it as a microphone. But it's much easier to yell into a headphone because it's a much smaller speaker and much easier to move. And, have fun. It's going to sound like crap, but you can do it. And kids, definitely do this at home. How does an analog to digital converter work? Well, we don't need to get into the math of it and all that nonsense. Just need to know the basics of it. And if you were to take an analog voltage from, say, a microphone, it's represented here on this little red line you can see in that graphic, then behind it is a grid representing vertically bits, which show a recording of amplitude or volume of the wave, and then horizontally sample rate, which is how we chop the wave into time. And the higher the bits and the higher the sample rate, the better the resolution. And that gets then translated into bits. This is an oscilloscope, which represents a waveform basically, and you're looking at a triangle wave, which is simple, but not that simple. And if we had a 2-bit 4 hertz sample rate, we wouldn't be able to recreate that triangle wave very well. Even as we raise up to 3 bits and 4 bits and 16 hertz, we're not going to be able to represent or recreate that triangle wave very well. Our ears are going to go, that just sounds like noise. And we have to get very, very high in sample rates and into at least 16 bits, maybe 12, maybe 8, but before our brain starts going, yeah, that sounds like sound that I recognize. Otherwise, it's just digital artifacts and all kinds of nonsense. But when we get out to about 44,000 hertz, then things start sounding good on the sample rate side and 16 bits on the bit side. Now, CD audio, as we know, is 16 bits for 4.1 kilohertz. That's a pretty good sample rate. CDs don't sound that great, but they sound way better than normal bias cassettes, right? Now, the minimum frame rate for being able to fool the brain, which is always lying to you, now you're going to lie to it, to fool the brain into thinking that it sounds like sound is 32,000 frames a second.
What?
And you're like, whoa, that's a lot of frames because, what's film run at? 24. And even Disney decided, well, you can get away with 13 frames a second with animation, and your brain will think, oh yeah, things are moving across the screen. Well, the difference between 32,000 frames and 13 frames is like, a 2,000 times difference. So that's a major, major situation for bandwidth, isn't it? But that also may be one of the reasons why audio is 80% of the audience's experience because of that massive amount of bandwidth difference.
So check it out. I'm back in Logic Pro, and I've got this cool track called I'm Bad, which I wrote years ago for a movie called Curse of the Shaolin. Here's how it goes. Pretty simple math. So in order to show you what an analog to digital converter can do, or rather what it doesn't do, let's take a look at this plugin. It's called Bit Crusher, and it's kind of simple. You've got overdrive. You can make things really, really crushed and horrible sounding, and you can blend the mix. You can also tell what kind of distortion you want. We'll try rap. Now you can actually take the resolution of the bits. In this case, this piece is recorded at 24 bits, and so is this session. You can bring this down all the way to 1 bit, and you can see what's happening over here with the waveform if that were a sine wave.
What?
And then the same thing happens here with downsampling. Right now we're at 48,000 frames a second. If we were to do this, then we're at 24,000. And then I don't know how the math goes, a division of 48 by 3, 18,000 I guess it is, 12,000 hertz. And it goes all the way down to like, awful. But let's check out what this sounds like. We'll start with bits. And I'll zoom back out. Let's hit play. We'll drop a few. Now 16 bits is roughly, well, it's exactly where your CD is. So it's really hard to tell a difference between 24 bits and 16 bits, but check it out. 24. And in headphones, it's super difficult unless you've got like crazy great audiophile situation. But we'll keep going. 16-bit. Now I'll tell you, 12-bit is where my first reverb, a little pedal by a company named Boss. It was 12-bit. Now, 8-bit is the very first sampler that I ever owned, the Ensoniq Mirage. Now, you ought to be able to hear a significant difference between 8 bits and 24. I'll go back and forth. Now, one of the reasons it's sort of difficult to hear the difference is because this is a mastered, everything's very loud, so it doesn't take a whole lot of bits to make this happen. But once we start getting below 8 bits, you're going to start hearing some pretty significant differences. Now you can hear that noise floor rise up, can't you? The signal to noise is really, really getting short. And why? The reason is that because your highest level here and your lowest level are, the lowest levels becoming higher and higher and higher. So there's very little room for amplitude to exist. So the noise floor has to get pushed up. Here, check this out. And at 3 bits, you just have very little capability to distinguish. You can see what the waveform sort of would look like in a triangle wave with 16 or 8 bits doing the work of what needs to be millions. And then 1 bit is unlistenable. You know, 1 bit is basically saying, is it on or is it off? Is it loud at maximum volume or is it complete silence? So that's what bits do. Let's listen to what sample rate does. So this is 48,000 hertz, 48,000 frames a second. – 24,000 frames a second. You're going to immediately hear the difference. Now, the minimum requirement that you need to make music in digital, so your brain believes it's the real thing, is 32,000. So we're right away below that level. So I'll go back and forth between these two. Watch out, man. 18. 12. It's starting to sound like an Atari 2600 video game now, right? I mean, we're down into the 4 digits worth, whatever, 48,000 divided by 12. Yeah, about 4,000 cycles a second instead of 48,000. There's 2400, which totally sounds like, even before that, sounds like Pong. Now it's starting to sound like an effect you'd see from Daft Punk and Tron Legacy. Let's go all the way to 40. And notices that we raise up the sampling frequency, we get more and more high frequencies, but anywhere below this, it starts getting unintelligible. Now, when we use them both, it's really fun. Watch this. Let me go here, we'll go to 6. And all we're doing here is downsampling the distortion of the bits, right? That's why it's really called Bit Crusher. And if we run this down to 100 hertz and 1 bit, I mean, you basically have nothing but distortion. So it's one of the reasons why we always want to record at 24 bits, are always at 48 kilohertz or higher.
Now, the human hearing ceiling is about 20,000 hertz, and nobody can really hear that. I mean, unless you're an elf or something, or you're a newborn baby. Newborn babies hear roughly 20,000 hertz, but after that, it kind of falls off pretty fast. So let's just take a look at these sampling rates. CD, we said, was 4.1, and that's pretty good for getting 20,000 hertz. And then what we do for video is 48,000 hertz or 1,000 frames. And then for Blu-rays and things like this, HD, whatever, recording, it'll go up to 96,000 hertz, which is great. My personal favorite is 192,000 frames a second. Sounds incredible, and we'll talk about this in later sections. And then the crazy guys at Sony decided to come up with what's called DSD, and that's 2.8 million. And I can assure you that also sounds very nice. Now, in the demo that we showed earlier, you heard what bits do to sound. Whether you have too few, it starts getting really, really grungy. CDs, we have 16 bits. It's called word length, 16 bits per sample in pulse code modulation. And it's okay, 16 bits is fine. It's not very good. And then we have 24 bits for HD recording. And if you have the choice, always choose 24 bits. And there's a really, really good reason for this. Check this out. Because if you look at 8 bits, that gives you 256 options for where the volume could be. Now, 16 bits can give you 65,536, and that's also really nice, but nowhere near as good as 24 bits at 16 million plus. All right. So for a little bit more data, you get a geometrically higher amount of possibilities and resolution. So no more 16-bit recording for any of you. You want to do 24-bit recording. And we want to record in lossless formats like WAV or AIFF, Sound Designer 2, if you're like me, or any of these others. One of the reasons we want to do that is because there's no compression. And compression is the killer of good mixing audio. Some of the lossy or compressed audio formats, of course, everybody's familiar with MP3, but there are these others as well we want to avoid recording in. And if you have a recorder that allows you to record in one of these lossy formats, just like Nancy Reagan, just say no. And you're like, well, why? I mean, it takes less data and all these other things. Well, let's take a look at the actual data, shall we? Because check it out. Stereo at 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, is around 144 kilobytes per second, or 8.64 megabytes per minute. Now, stereo MP3 is one at like 192 kilobaud, is about 24 kilobytes per second, or 1.44 megabytes per minute. And you're like, well, yeah, man, that's a huge difference. That's like 7.2 megabytes a minute I could save. Yes. So if you're doing ProRes, like all you are doing at HQ 1080p, look at the difference. If you have lossless audio, that's 384 megabytes per minute. Oh, but if it's lossy audio, you're only 376 megabytes per minute. It's not that big of a deal when you're doing video at ProRes. But here's the biggest deal. The biggest deal is in processing. Now, why do I like recording at 192 kilohertz? Well, not because it saves so much data, that's for doggone sure, nor does it save a lot of CPU power. But when it comes to editing, like if I add a reverb to a dialogue track that's recorded at 192 kilohertz, I mean, it's like you've died and gone to heaven. It's incredible. And the same thing when we record in lossless formats. If you take an MP3 file and run it through all kinds of processing and all kinds of crazy things like this, and then expect to spit out a nice file, it's not going to be sounding that great. You're going to have a large amount of degradation because processing requires really high order math, which I'm not going to get into. And if that audio has been compressed, the mathematics break down and it starts inventing where the sound should be, inventing what the sound should sound like, called dither, and all kinds of other inharmonic distortions. Sounds horrible, sounds grainy, it's very difficult to listen to over time, and ultimately you'll lose your audience.
Let's take a look at the difference then, actual both audio and visual difference between saving at full resolution and saving with all kinds of different compressions. We're going to compare full resolution 24-bit 48K AIF with 128 kilobaud MP3. A lot of really great sounding MP3s happen at 128 kilobaud. I never save anything at 128, it's just never enough. But in this case, it's supposed to be, and indeed, it's not bad. This is a piece called Birthing the Spring from my record Journey of the Seasons. I'm just going to play this. This is the full unadulterated 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, unaffected anything. We'll just play a little bit so you get the idea. So you get the gist, big piano, orchestra, no sweat. What you're looking at is RX5 from iZotope, and this is a spectrogram, left channel, right channel, and you've got high frequencies, low frequencies, high frequencies, low frequencies. The brighter the frequency, the louder it is, and you can see the string overtones and the fundamentals going crazy. Big cymbal. You can see all the strings. So we'll talk about this in depth in other volumes, in fix and mix and all kinds of other things. But for now, this is what it sounds like in full resolution. Let's check and listen to what it sounds like at MP3. Now, first of all, you'll immediately notice a massive difference. Look at the frequencies that are cut off. Everything above 15.5K, gone, with the exception of some loud bits. Look at all the bits that are in between, black, not there anymore. We'll go back to the original. Nice and full, all the way up to the highest frequencies, but an MP3, look at this. So here's a listen. Let me go back a little bit. And to listen to it in full resolution. And one more time back to the MP3. You can really hear it in this section and, of course, here, where it just feels grainy and whole, kind of, well, when I say holy, I mean like lots of hootiness. It's really, really subtle, though. You can still enjoy this music at 128 kilobaud MP3. The issue really starts showing up when we have to process this audio with MP3, and that's why we never, ever record at MP3. We always record at full resolution. We're going to go back to the original, and what I've done is I've added a little bit of EQ, I've added some compression, I've added some limiting, and I've added some spatial widening. So things get really, really, seems like they're wider in stereo than they really are. This is the original full resolution, processed at full resolution, saved out at full resolution. The original file, processed at full resolution, saved out at full resolution. AIF, 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. Now you'll notice some of the interesting compression that's already happened in the due to the processing, but this is full resolution. You can hear the difference. Things are wider. There's a little bit less poignancy as to where instruments are. They just feel wider and a different frequency curve. And especially listen to how that cymbal tapers off as we move to other examples. Okay, here now is a 128 kilobaud file processed at full resolution and saved at full resolution. So it was once 128 kilobaud. We brought it into Logic. We processed it at 4824 and we saved it at 4824. Now you can immediately look at the difference. The original file data we know isn't there. And look at what happens here. Let me go back here. It's almost oscillating. Wah, 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 wah. Whereas we go back to the full process, the full resolution. All right, now we have that, and you can just see it visually, the difference. Now what we have here is a 128 kilobaud file processed at full resolution and saved back at 128 kilobaud as an MP3. Massive difference between this, even just visually, and this. But let's check out what it sounds like. We'll go back a bit here. And listen what happens with the cymbal here. You can actually see it in the file, how it there's bumps and weird kinds of things that you can hear. It's almost like distortion or layering. And if this were a Photoshop file trying to get that gradient, this is exactly what's happening. You can see these lines show up. And it's the same digital issue in audio that we have in visual, same bits. It's just trying to compress, and what you get in that compression is that kind of dithering or even a moire pattern, and it'll show up throughout as it's trying to minimize bandwidth. But if we go back to the original, look at nothing. There's no bandwidth issues or moire patterns. So beautiful, right? As compared to this nonsense. I mean, you literally hear it going, tuck, 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 tuck. Sounds like you're listening to it through a box fan as opposed to this, our original. Beautiful and smooth. So we never, ever record anything in any kind of baud, MP3, whatever. Always 48, 24 at the minimum.
So let me just give you a visual example of what I'm talking about. You see these silly rocks. They're just dumb rocks, I know. Your brain knows that they're rocks, though. This is actually several examples of JPEG artifacture. Now, the one on the left is full resolution, no sweat, raw. And as we progress, you can see that the data, although your brain can still understand that the one on the right, fully compressed, is dumb rocks. Do you want to pull a green screen composite from that at that resolution? Do you want to do any color balancing or anything like that on that? Absolutely not. So any kind of processing you want to do, you're going to want to do at the highest resolution, the highest bandwidth picture. It's exactly the same thing for audio. So what's this? What's that big sun area up there? Yeah, it's blown out, it's over, you've overexposed it. And in digital, even if you're in RAW, can you get any data back from that? No, it's gone. It's useless. There's nothing there. There's no more data. And the same thing is in audio. So say it with me. Never go over 0 dB. That's right. Never go over. If you do, it looks just like that sunburst. There's nothing going on there that you can pull back, and you've lost it, and you're in ADR or worse. You know, some of you are like, well, but Mark, I want to get, a nice distortion effect. How do I do that? Well, record it at a nominal level and use a plugin. Look at this picture. Do you think they shot her this way? No way. They shot her nominally, reasonably, and then they just used a plugin and did kind of this bleach bypass thing or whatever.
So yeah, you can use distortion effects. You don't have to fry everything. We're back in Audition. This is a piece I wrote for Omega One, the motion comic. Pretty simple stuff. And we can engage the distortion plugin under special distortion. And it's kind of unusual. It's an unusual plugin for distortion among digital audio workstations, but check out what you can do with it. That's pretty mean. Let's see what the plugins will let us do. How about tape drive? That's pretty mean. Real mean. And as you can see, you don't need to overdrive your actual files. Obviously, we were overdriving here like crazy. We can always turn it down. But you've got plenty of latitude in the wonderful world of distortion plugins here in Audition to hurt yourself if you want to, without going over zero on your actual recording.
So this is just the beginning. We've done a little theory, we've done a little had fun with audio, and what follows is everything that you're gonna need to be able to get you that $50 million impact on your audience that you've been dreaming of. We're gonna cover everything: editing, mixing, fixing, music, sound effects, all of it is gonna blow your mind. We'll see you on set.